When I was studying in university, I had an amazing productivity system. I knew myself very well. First of all, I knew I never wanted to do what I was supposed to be doing. And second of all, I knew that my most productive time were the last 2 days before the deadline. And so here's what I would do. In the first 3 weeks and 5 days of a 4-week task, I would do what I did best, which is the exact opposite of what I'm supposed to be doing. And so I would do all types of useful and productive things like painting, writing poetry, or networking with other students in bars. And then in the last 2 days, I would write 20 pages and take an hour or two to go through some books and randomly insert some footnotes to create the illusion that I based my findings on something. Now, the best part of this type of procrastination, let's call it deadline procrastination, is that it actually works like a charm. It didn't take long before I won poetry competitions and painting competitions because of all the procrastination I was doing. And on top of that, I handed in my papers on time. Now, the problem with this type of procrastination is that it only works when there are deadlines. The moment deadlines fall away, it becomes very deadly. You lose all sense of direction and belonging in your life and usually fail dramatically for a particular amount of time. And so that's exactly what happened to me. After I quit university, I failed dramatically. My art career was going nowhere. I realized the awards didn't mean anything and definitely didn't result in sales. And for a couple of years, it seemed like I was constantly working but not getting anything serious done. And this is something that happens to a lot of artists and entrepreneurs because in those types of lifestyles, there are no deadlines. And in a world without deadlines, deadline procrastination is like waiting for Godot. Waiting for a moment that will never come. Sometimes it's so bad that artists wait their whole lives for their lives to begin. And so it's clear that procrastination kills most people's lives. It kills their dreams, ambitions, and goals. And it's truly a death by 1,000 cuts. You will live your life in a normal way, and then suddenly something reminds you of that thing that you still have to do, and you'll get a hit of pure anxiety for a couple of seconds. And after a couple of years of procrastination, you get that hit of pure anxiety 30 times a day, which is just a very unpleasant way to live your life. And the worst part about it for me wasn't that I was not able to do the work, it was that everything else in life got a layer of guilt over it. It was as if I couldn't enjoy anything anymore. And so it's definitely in our best interest to solve procrastination. And solving procrastination starts with recognizing that you are procrastinating in the first place, which is sometimes much harder than it sounds. And so let's talk about some of the different ways of procrastination that are out there. The first type of procrastinator is the Einstein-tinator, which reveals itself through delusional thoughts of genius. Let me explain what I mean. At some point, procrastination suggested, for example, that I was wasting my time by not procrastinating because one day before the deadline, I was working at my best performance, and so procrastination told me that I needed to increase the amount of time I worked at my best performance by procrastinating more, with more deadlines and shorter intervals in between. It told me that by procrastinating, I was using that extra boost of energy that I could only access through procrastination. At some point, procrastination went as far as to convince me that I was a genius based on the amount of work I'm able to do one day before the deadline. Now, these delusional ideas about you being able to conquer the world with the work ethic, insights, and sheer talent you show on that one day before the deadline is complete bullshit. It's not true. You're not a genius because you worked fast for a couple of hours. And looking back, it's easy to see that procrastination is always lying and always completely full of shit. But there was a time where I believed those delusional ideas, and that's the power procrastination has. It can be very convincing. The next type of procrastinator is the macrocrastinator, which is a procrastinator that uses drama to procrastinate. You might not realize it, but procrastination will transform itself into anything if that's what it takes to deceive you. In some cases, that's through creating drama that you can then use as an excuse to not do any work afterwards. And sometimes procrastination goes as far as to convince a whole friend group or entire family to participate in the procrastination. Here's what will happen. Mark will suddenly cheat on Janice with Natasha, and then Jeff will take over by starting a relationship with 3 girls at the same time. And then right before Kimberly crashes the Lambo of her dad while being drunk, Melissa will start dating your dad. And to top that year off, Mark will accidentally send a naked video of you while you were being drunk to other members of the friend group, just so that you have something to think about while you are thinking. And the best thing of them all is that in the meantime, nobody gets a damn thing done. Perfect procrastination, very hard to see. And because it's so hard to see, it's very dangerous. I've seen people procrastinate on drama for an entire decade, and I'm only 28 and they're not even done yet. So that decade might turn into 2 decades, we'll see. Another way to procrastinate is through attention seeking. It's a type of procrastinator that I like to call the Bowie imitator. Why would you push out several videos every single week on YouTube without getting any money for it for 5 years straight if you can get just as much attention by tattooing a tear on your face? The thing with attention seeking is that it's a cheaper way to get the same amount of dopamine than actually accomplishing something. And so here's what will happen. Artists will tattoo their faces full because they can't do the actual work. Artists will dye their hair in a different color every single month and publicly contemplate whether or not they should get another piercing on a weekly basis. Artists will wear a pajama pants to art school because it gets them noticed and it's easier than making great art. Now, the reason this is so omnipresent in the art world is because if attention seeking is done properly, it can also be a marketing strategy. If done properly, it actually works. Lady Gaga dressing up in a meat dress worked pretty well, for example. And so the line between marketing strategy and procrastination is very thin. In other words, the problem is that people who color their hair together with their favorite barber, procrastination, can always point to David Bowie and pretend they're doing a good job. And besides the drama and attention seeking, there are a lot of other forms of procrastination that I left out. There's self-medication, there's invented mental diseases, there's victimhood, there's choosing the wrong partner, there's healing, for example. And don't get me wrong, some of these things are not forms of procrastination. Healing, for example, can be necessary, can be something that you have to make time for, but more often than not, healing is just a form of procrastination. Now that we know some forms of procrastination, let's talk about how we can solve it. First of all, I'm not going to pretend that it's easy because it's very hard. If it would be easy, everyone would be a billionaire. Procrastination robbed many men from their dreams. If you look at Hitler, for example, he wanted to become a painter. At the age of 18, he took his entire inheritance and moved to Vienna to become a painter. But why didn't you see any of his paintings? Why did you never hear of his art career? Well, it turns out that he couldn't win the battle against procrastination. Stephen Pressfield once said that it was easier for Hitler to start the Second World War than it was for him to face the blank canvas. And so what can we do to overcome the fear of the blank canvas? Well, I'm definitely not an expert, but the best thing that works for me is the 1 paragraph rule. It's to make sure that the start of your task is as easy as possible. If you have a paper that you have to write, tell yourself to just write 1 paragraph. After those 7 lines, you can play video games, eat McDonald's food, or jerk off as much as you want. It doesn't matter as long as you write 1 paragraph first. And more often than not, you will find yourself a couple of hours later staring down on 5 pages you just wrote. It's as if the first law of Newton is not only true in physics, but also in human behavior. The first law states that an object in rest will stay in rest and an object in motion will stay in motion unless an external force is applied to it. In other words, writing more paragraphs when you are already writing is easier than stop writing and starting something new completely from scratch. In other words, you have to make sure you just start. The problem people are having is not a problem with working, it's a problem with starting. The problem is not that they're not able to achieve their dreams. The problem is that they are not able to start chasing their dreams in the first place. And the reason people postpone on starting is, well, I don't really know. Looking back, I don't know why I was postponing the starting all the time. I guess sometimes I felt not good enough. Sometimes I didn't have enough energy. Sometimes I wasn't focused enough. And sometimes I just didn't felt awake yet. Or sometimes I just didn't felt great for no particular reason. But the truth about starting is that you don't have to feel great in order to start, but you have to start in order to feel great. The solution lies in the starting itself. Another thing I noticed when I was still friends with procrastination is that I was constantly waiting to have enough motivation. But throughout the years, I learned 2 things about motivation. First, waiting for motivation is not how it works. It's the other way around. You first have to do the work and then afterwards the motivation follows. The motivation is already there, but it has to find you working before it enters. And the second thing I learned is that you cannot go too deep in motivation either, because sometimes motivation is procrastination in disguise. Procrastination knows that motivation leads to having way too much energy, which results in overambitious and unrealistic timetables, and with crazy unrealistic timetables, procrastination knows that we will never be able to keep up the pace and that we will eventually crash and stop the project altogether. And so procrastination knows that motivation, more often than not, is a form of procrastination itself. Another solution I've used throughout the years is to do the research and writing part of what I'm doing in different locations, going in different coffee shops or different libraries and making some kind of day trip out of that. I used to do that intuitively when I was still studying at university. I would go to libraries and study rooms all of the time. And it was only after a couple of years that I stumbled upon the science behind that. It turns out that new environments trigger the creation of dopamine in the brain, which gives you a rush of energy that you can then use to work more and go deeper into your flow state. And so this might be a little trick that helps you as well. Now, does this mean that I stop procrastinating with this one paragraph rule? No. Some of the most important things in life I still procrastinate on, like finding a girlfriend and starting a relationship, for example, because the one paragraph rule doesn't seem to work there. And so it's definitely not perfect. And besides this one paragraph rule, there is also something to say about the overstimulation that we are getting in our internet lives today. I once heard an advice on a TED Talk that stated, do something boring 1 hour a day, every day, because it helps you to get used to not being overstimulated all of the time. Now, I'm not sure if this is an official advice for procrastinators, but it does feel right to me. Some of us simply need to learn how to enjoy boring things again. If that sounds like you, I would recommend watching my video Why I Choose to Live a Boring Life as an Artist. It's linked up, and if you don't want to watch it now, procrastinate on it and put it in your watch later.